July 31, 1969. The International Hotel, Las Vegas. Elvis Presley walked onto a stage he would occupy for the next 8 years, performing 837 shows that would redefine his career while slowly destroying his soul. What began as a triumphant return to live performance would become a gilded prison that trapped the king of rock and roll in a cycle of nightly shows, prescription drugs, and spiritual emptiness. This is the story of how Las Vegas saved Elvis Presley's career and killed the man, creating a legend that was as much about tragedy as it was about triumph. But to understand how Vegas became Elvis's golden cage, you have to understand where he was in 1969. The man who had revolutionized popular music in the 1950s and conquered Hollywood in the 1960s was creatively and spiritually lost. 8 years of making formulaic movies for Colonel Parker's financial benefit had left him artistically empty and personally depressed. The music industry had moved past him, with artists like the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and the Rolling Stones defining what popular music could be, while Elvis was soundtrack albums for forgettable films. The idea for a Las Vegas residency came from Colonel Parker's recognition that Elvis needed to reconnect with live performance, but it also reflected the Colonel's fundamental misunderstanding of what Elvis needed as an artist. Parker saw Vegas as a safe commercial opportunity, a way to generate consistent revenue without the risks and complications of touring or recording new material. But what Elvis needed was creative challenge and authentic artistic expression, things that the Vegas entertainment machine was specifically designed to eliminate. The early Vegas shows were electric with possibility and redemption. Elvis had spent months preparing for his return to live performance, working with musicians who understood his musical vision and rehearsing material that connected him to his rock and roll roots. When he walked onto that International Hotel stage in July 1969, he was performing with an intensity and authenticity that reminded everyone why he had become famous in the first place. The audience response to those first Vegas performances was overwhelming. Critics who had written Elvis off as a has-been were forced to acknowledge that he could still command a stage like no other performer in popular music. The combination of his vocal power, physical charisma, and emotional vulnerability created concert experiences that transcended typical Vegas entertainment and approached something like religious experience for audiences who had grown up with his music. But Vegas had a way of corrupting everything it touched, and Elvis was not immune to its influence. The city's culture of excess, instant gratification, and artificial stimulation began to seep into every aspect of his life. The prescription drugs that he had originally used to manage the physical demands of performing became a daily necessity for dealing with the psychological pressures of being Elvis Presley in a city that never slept and never stopped demanding entertainment. The jumpsuit costumes that became Elvis's Vegas trademark were both artistic triumph and personal tragedy. Designed by Bill Ballou, they were intended to give Elvis a regal, almost superhuman presence on stage. But they also became symbols of his imprisonment, elaborate costumes that transformed him from a person into a character, a living museum piece performing the same songs night after night for audiences who wanted nostalgia rather than innovation. As the years passed, the Vegas residency began to take a physical and emotional toll that was visible to everyone except Elvis himself. The man who had once been a revolutionary artist became a reliable entertainer, delivering competent but increasingly mechanical performances of songs that had once meant everything to him. The spontaneity and danger that had defined his early career were replaced by professional, polish, and predictable crowd-pleasing. The relationship with his audience during the Vegas years was both deeply intimate and profoundly isolating. Elvis would perform for thousands of people every night, receiving standing ovations and emotional responses that would have satisfied any other entertainer. But the applause was often for the memory of who he had been rather than appreciation for who he was becoming. The crowds wanted to see the king of rock and roll, not a middle-aged man struggling with addiction, depression, and creative frustration. The financial success of the Vegas residency was extraordinary, generating millions of dollars that made Elvis one of the highest-paid entertainers in the world. But the money became another prison, creating dependencies for everyone in his organization while providing Elvis with the resources to indulge in increasingly destructive behaviors. Success on this scale had become a burden rather than a liberation, proof that he was trapped in a lifestyle that was slowly killing him. The creative stagnation of the Vegas years was perhaps the most tragic aspect of Elvis's imprisonment. The man who had once been willing to risk everything to create new sounds and challenge musical boundaries became increasingly conservative, sticking to arrangements and song choices that pleased audiences but offered him no artistic satisfaction. The Vegas entertainment machine discouraged experimentation and rewarded conformity, values that were antithetical to everything that had made Elvis special. Behind the scenes, Elvis's personal life during the Vegas years was a study in contradictions. He was surrounded by people but deeply lonely, wealthy but spiritually impoverished, adored by millions but unable to form authentic relationships with the people closest to him. The prescription drugs that helped him cope with the demands of performing also isolated him from genuine human connection and emotional honesty. The end of Elvis's life in 1977 was both shocking and inevitable, the result of 8 years of physical and psychological abuse disguised as professional success. The Vegas residency had given him financial security and kept him in the public eye, but it had also contributed to the isolation and self-destructive behaviors that ultimately killed him at the age of 42. The legacy of Elvis's Vegas years is complicated and tragic, a reminder that commercial success and artistic fulfillment are not the same thing. The residency proved that Elvis could still draw massive crowds and generate enormous revenue, but it also demonstrated how the entertainment industry could trap even its biggest stars in cycles of repetition and creative death. Looking back, the Vegas residency stands as both the peak and the nadir of Elvis Presley's career, 8 years that showcased his unparalleled talent while documenting his descent into the kind of personal and artistic compromise that kills the spirit even as it enriches the bank account. The king of rock and roll had become the king of Las Vegas, but the crown was made of fool's gold, and wearing it had cost him everything that truly mattered. The man who walked onto the International Hotel stage in 1969 was still recognizably the same person who had revolutionized popular music in the 1950s. The man who performed his final Vegas show in 1976 was a shadow of that revolutionary artist, a cautionary tale about what happens when authentic creativity is sacrificed for commercial security and popular approval. Elvis Presley's Vegas residency remains one of the most successful entertainment ventures in the history of popular music, but it also serves as a warning about the price of that kind of success. Sometimes the golden cage is the most dangerous prison of all, because it's so comfortable that you don't realize you're trapped until it's too late to escape.